Hello and welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy. This is the lecture for the month of October 2011. Almost 1 year here at KennyRoy.com. I've been doing this since basically officially launching at CTN Expo, which was November 18th last year. It's November 18th this year again. That's kind of weird. Lucky. I did a lot of recordings of lectures before that when I was lecturing at conferences and educational events around North America, and then I started to just think like, hey, maybe I should just keep on doing these videos, and it's been a great time, and I'm probably going to get even more sentimental next month, but anyway, I just always want to repeat how appreciative I am of you supporting the site and being here and checking out what I'm doing here. So this lecture is a workflow walkthrough on a dialogue shot. It's going to be 2 or 3 parts. We're going to see how much we can get through, and then I'm going to decide how long it's going to be. But I wanted to incorporate a suggestion from this forums, which was you want to see how to make your animation more snappy. That was requested in the forums, and when I started thinking about how I was going to do that, I first started by thinking, okay, well, it's going to be a video mail. Definitely going to be a video mail because I can make a kind of like a soupy piece of animation, much more snappy with a couple of tweaks. But I really wanted you to instead have the entire thought process from the beginning so that you could follow along and go through it yourself, okay? So, and also the last workflow walkthrough series was on a pantomime shot. It was the flour sack rig jumping onto a block and kind of like falling while he's doing that, and then like scooching himself back up. And if you haven't checked that out, you should definitely check that out, the workflow walkthrough series. I think it was February, March, and April of this year. But it was pantomime, and I wanted to go through some of the things, combine some of the tips that I've been giving in the Ask Video Mails into a lecture. Some things like, for instance, doing the inner monologue as a timing tool, sketching the energy of the dialogue, finding the anchors that are in the dialogue, and all the other things that we've been talking about. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a piece of dialogue. I'm actually going to use, this is another thing why this is cool, I'm going to be starting production on my short film called The Little Painter. And he's a rig that I've made, and I started this shot for the 11-second club, and I think it was last year even, but it was the line. Well, you'll hear it. I won't spoil it for you. I also want to show you a little bit of my new rig, and some things that you might want to think about if you ever come across a rig that has these kinds of controls in terms of like snappy animation and style. Because if you've seen any of the cartoon lectures, the beginning or the intermediate, style is not just like a repetition of like a visual thing, a visual trick. That's not what it is. That's just being repetitive. That's overusing something. That's twinning, basically, in a grand sense. Style is always having a thoughtful and well-planned answer to the kinds of questions that you need to be asking yourself before you start your animation. Like, how much are we going to use silhouette to emphasize or overemphasize a character's inner thoughts? So if a character is feeling really strong, are we always going to go really kind of overboard, almost like symbolic with the silhouettes? Or are silhouettes just kind of a little bit more by the book? Meaning you want strong silhouettes, and we're just going to animate everything with just nice silhouettes and just keep everything looking nice, but we're not really making a statement with the silhouettes. That would be a question, the answer to which dictates your style, okay? So this rig has limbs that are bendy, and I built something in where I can actually take the limbs and really actually bend them in any direction I want, and even make them like a hard corner, like an elbow, or completely smooth interpolation between two joints, like a noodle. So just some things that you may want to think about as you're planning a shot with a little bit of style in there. But I'm going to be mostly thinking about how to incorporate the snappy animation style to this shot. So let me talk a little bit first about what snappy means. Snappy doesn't necessarily mean just fast, because if you don't have the right spacing and the right arcs, what happens really quickly is your animation just looks like it's sped up, especially if it's evenly timed. So that's why your spacing is so important, because you need to have very subtle, almost felt, not even seen, accelerations and decelerations in snappy animation. Overall, yes, it is a lot more, like the motions are quicker. You wouldn't want to do a snappy animation for, you know, a really, really like subtle scene where two characters are just like sitting there and staring each other deep in the eyes and going over something very emotional. So you need to be an appropriate choice. But the main thing that I would say is that you want to respect materials, and you want to think about materials. And what materials are you working with? You're working with a character who has a spine that is bones covered with muscle and tendons and ligaments, and all of the motion that you're trying to convey needs to respect that there are limits to how those things can all come together and work together and move together. And the amount that you push that, the more your animation is going to be snappy. There's a good shot in Bug's Life where Flick is, he just got finished being yelled at basically by the ant council, and Princess Ada is standing there, and she says something, and to him it's a brilliant idea, and he goes, oh! And pew, he zips off. It's like 2 frames zip off, but then he zips back on, gives her a little kiss, and pew, zips off again. I would say that is basically the furthest you could possibly push this snappy animation, meaning his 2 frame zip off was a very, very cartoon choice, because Pixar is not actually really all that cartoony in their animation. They're really not. They're pushed realism. But that was a very cartoony choice, and that was a very snappy moment. If you want to see a ton of snappy animation, it's actually in Robots. Like the first 2 minutes of Robots is basically 100% all snappy animation. It's everybody snapping 2 poses and hitting them and sticking them. Okay, so we'll talk a lot about how we're going to keep this shot nice and snappy as we're creating it. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to go through our workflow the same way that we always do, because there's no reason to get rid of our workflow. There's no reason to drop our workflow once we're professional animators, or whatever you want to call it. There's absolutely no reason. So let's go ahead and open up the workflow PDF. Okay, so here we go. My simplified workflow checklist. This is actually a fun thing to have, just to print out, so that you can actually work with or cross out whatever you're not going to be using. The planning stage is obviously where we start, and in our we get to test, we get to use, anything that we want to, and we get to leave out what we want to. Okay, so I like to use thumbnails and acting out are my two favorite. Reference is good for more physical things or for more realistic things. I definitely want to avoid listening or watching rather the movie that this line came from, because that will influence you way too much. We don't normally have too much time for pencil tests on production, especially TV production. You have a lot more time in feature production. X sheets you might get from a production company, as well as storyboards, but don't forget to journal your workflow if you haven't started that process already. So we're going to go with thumbnails and acting it out, and I have acted it out, this line over and over and over, and my thumbnails are going to be I'll show you a few of my thumbnails. And normally at this point, my thumbnails are mostly kind of just poses that I want to hit in like an ideal world. I don't really stick to a linear thumbnailing process. I don't like listen to the dialogue and really like on this word, hit this pose and draw the pose and then copy that in Maya. For me, and this might be different, I'm just explaining my workflow. For me, I hear like a certain like moment where like a character is like incredulous, and then I'll just want to draw the most incredulous pose I possibly can and get it in there somehow. And then I hear one where a character is shocked, and then I just want to draw the most shocked pose that I possibly can. And the reason I think that this works for me is because you don't have any boiling down happening as you're thumbnailing. You know what I mean? So if you started with a pose, like let's say that it was a pretty strong pose, and the character was like stretched out or whatever, and then you went to the next word in the dialogue and you heard something that was kind of like internal, so you start thinking to yourself, well, I'm going to draw this like kind of like internal pose, but then you look before, oh, I just have this gigantic pose. So you might start kind of watering down your pose because you're like, oh, it has to come right after this. For me, I like best case scenario, I would get the most iconic pose for that feeling as I possibly can. Okay? So it's a little bit different. And then we're going to go probably through blocking in this video, this lecture, and then we'll talk at length about how we're going to keep the snappiness in the shot. Okay, so let's listen to the dialogue. You've all heard this before. Okay, it was the 11-second club. Let's see here. September competition of last year. Wow, long time ago now.
You think posing as the devil, you think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy.
One more time.
You think posing as the devil, you think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy.
Okay, so remember what I first did in that Ask Video Mail where I talked about listening to dialogue. Okay, first thing I do is I type it out, and then once I have it all typed out, I can draw basically the energy in the dialogue. So let me actually fill the background with a little bit of a darker color so that we can so that we can see the words. Here we go. Okay, and then I'm going to be drawing in a nice bright color. Okay, so this is me. All I'm doing is I'm listening to the dialogue, and I'm just going to be drawing like the energy as I feel it. Okay, so here we go.
You think posing as the devil, You think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you
Here we
be
go.
more convinced?
You're crazy. You think posing as the devil, you think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy. You think posing as the devil, you think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy. You think posing as the devil, you think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy. You think posing as the devil, you think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy.
Okay.
You think posing...
Okay, cool. So what's going on right here? So now I'll pick a new color and I'll kind of like annotate what's going on. I feel like this is like left and right. You think posing, big like surge right here as the devil. But even the first time that I heard it, I felt this. Like, well, I'll do it for you. Watch.
You think posing as the devil, you think it's gonna...
Like I totally heard like just like the 1, 2 like sided like feeling in the line. And then I definitely feel like a shake. Like you think it's gonna scare me, like da, 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 da. So like I feel like there's like this staccato movement, and so that's why there's this strong, small back and forth. Then the laugh, big laugh, and then it ain't. But it comes back and it's very fast. So that's why over here it's kind of fast what I'm doing. I want to get an even lighter color. Okay, that's why it's like it fasts out, right? But it might come to a stop too. Ha! It ain't. You know, let's listen to that together.
Think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
It ain't. It kind of feels like a strike. Ha! It ain't. Okay. And then I'm only animating the one character, so we're gonna skip that. We're gonna skip Robert De Niro, and then back to the breath.
Would you be more convinced?
Big breath.
You're crazy.
And there's a hitch in it. You know, it's a you're and then crazy a little bit, but I don't want to hit that too hard. And then the final exhale. This is too big. I don't like that. Then the final exhale. Okay. So if I hide that, if I hide the words, basically this is kind of like the energy of my shot. Okay. So let's kind of like put it into one kind of big, long, linear thing. I'm going to turn down the opacity here. And here's kind of the energy line. Okay, so this is like above this is high energy, below this is like the opposite sort of. So I can use this for, you know, sizes of the energy. I can use this for like leaning one way or another. So it's like you think posing as the devil, you think is gonna scare me. Ha! It ain't. Really quick and like staccato. Then the guy says the line and he comes back. Big inhale. You're crazy. Okay, so I'm going to hide everything. And this is kind of how I'm feeling about the shot. This is the energy in the shot. Now, I'm not sure if you've all gone and checked this out yet, but Paul Lesane, his blog has this really awesome image. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to show it, so I'm just not going to. So forgive me for not doing it, but it's Paul Lesane, P-A-U-L-L-A-S-A-I-N-E, Paul Lesane. Check this guy out. Go back into the archive of his blog back when he was doing Surf's Up stuff, and you'll see something that looks exactly like this. And it's basically the surfing styles of all the penguins in Surf's Up. And you can see the energy. And right here, we kind of get that same thing. We have like the sweeping kind of movements. We have the staccato, the short movements. And this, okay, all of this shows me as much information really as an X sheet would, as a phonetic breakdown, way more actually, way more than like a phonetic breakdown of the words. You don't need that. If you have the energy in the body of your character, you will have successful animation, period. Because you can always tweak the lip sync. So a phonetic breakdown of the words, like where does that get you? No, you need to feel the energy, and this is a great way to get it. So you think posing as the devil, you think is going to scare me? Ha! It ain't. Boom. And then he listens, and then big inhale. You're crazy. Okay? So I would save this, okay, and either put it on another monitor or print it out and just like have it by my desk. So let me actually just do that. I'm going to save it to my desktop as energy, just as a JPEG. Okay. Now let's close this, and then let's see here, energy, and now I have it on my desktop. So as I'm animating, right here, boom, I can always just like keep this on hand, right there, all right, to remind me. Now, next thing up on my workflow checklist is thumbnails. Okay, so again, I just like try to like hit some fun poses, and so here I have just one page of thumbs. I kind of felt that he could be kind of like when he's kind of insinuating that there's nothing that's scaring him, that he could almost be in this pose, which is kind of like leaning forward and kind of like, oh, you think you're all Mr. Big Fancy Devil Pants, don't you? And then, think it's gonna scare me? It ain't. That ain't. I really felt like a forward motion where it like stops. So that's where I'm gonna have him take a step forward and take what I think is a very dynamic pose. I'm going to give him a sword that he can wag around. Give him a little bit of secondary on that sword, just a little bit. Maybe I'll have him like gesture with it and then like hold it with his hand and kind of be Mr. Devil as well. So I normally, if I can't think of a secondary that doesn't have a prop, I'll just give a character a prop. Characters have props in a lot of shots as well. They'll normally be doing something. You'll give them something to do. So don't think that giving them a prop is cheating. Is basically what I wanted to get to. And then I don't know, this pose not very strong. I don't think I'm going to use that pose. And then when he's frustrated, he's just going to be totally deflated. And so I kind of wanted this line right here. And it had been a while since I modeled this character, and I modeled him from a very teensy tiny, see if I have it, little sketch I did in my sketchbook a long time ago. Let's see here. But when I did it, I fell in love with it, and I had to make it. I have not done yet what you should do, which is to learn how to quickly and accurately thumbnail the character that you're working with. Okay? Remember that tip? Because when you start on a production, you need to be able to communicate visually. You need to be able to tell a story with thumbnails that communicates your vision for your shot to your supervisor and the director. You need to be able to understand, oh, here it is. Okay, I know this is tiny, you can barely see it, but there it is. That's That's the design that I started from. So, and then, you know, we got to the 3D model, which I'll show you in just 1 second. But before I storyboard, I said I'm going to go into production on my short film. You're really going to like it, and I'll show you guys a page that you can go to find out more about that in a bit. But before I start production on my short film, I'm going to definitely have to learn how to much more quickly and accurately thumbnail my character so that I can do boards that are really communicative, because I'm not going to be animating it just myself. So, you know, an animator that sits down needs to see like what's going on, what pose is this, and what facial expression, etc. So, but for my purposes, the thumbnails that I've done to this point tell me enough information, especially when you pair them with this little energy chart that I have. They work out fine. So let me save that and just minimize that. And get this out of the way. And so now it's time for layout. We're going to be concerning ourselves again with staging, composition, and story. Now, when we're listening to the dialogue and we pick out the anchors, staging and composition do play a part in how we're going to set up this scene. Remember, we want to over-animate those anchors. Why? Because when you really hit those anchors hard on the head, an audience member watching, like, they get pulled in, just like it's irresistible to just get more and more invested in the reality of what you're watching when you hit an anchor. And there's a couple good ones in here. Let's listen to it one more time so that you can hear them as well.
You think posing as the devil, you think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy.
Okay. The two main ones are the laugh, the before it ain't, and the big breath at the end. There is a few more super tiny ones, and what we'll try to do is in the blocking plus/polish phase, make sure that we've over animated them. Let's see if we can pick them out.
You think posing as the devil, you think it's...
Okay. It's on posing. He doesn't say posing like I just did, posing. He goes posing, and he brings the sound into his mouth, and there's kind of almost a voice break. His voice kind of cracks, but it's like internal. Listen to it.
You think posing as the...
Think posing. It's almost like that. Posing. Posing. Anyway, it's kind of hard to replicate. But what that means is that if we take a pose where he's like his neck is bent over and we have a little bit of like movement that comes to a stop that almost feels like the air is getting cut off right on that word, it will suck the audience in to the reality of the scene, okay? Remember, anchors are anything that is nonverbal that affects the dialogue, that affects the sound. It's not a sound effect. Like if you hear like a pen drop, you know, obviously you have to have him holding a pen and he has to drop it, right? I should probably stop dropping my brand new Wacom pen. That's stupid. But it's not sound effects. It's body noises, and not just noises, but anything that can be explained by your animation as affecting the sound of the dialogue that is being made, and breaths, of course, you know, big outward exhales, things like that. Okay, so that's the first one that I hear. The first small subtle one is the ing of posing.
You think posing as the devil, you think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy.
Okay. No, even the crazy on the end of You're Crazy has that breath really affecting it, but it's still part of the bigger anchor of the breath. It's in the middle here. Listen one more time.
You think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
It's the scare. It's the beginning of scare. There's another one of those kind of internal like voice crack break things. All we have to do is just a little bit overemphasize that word, and again, the audience will be sucked into the reality of this scene. They're like, scare. No, I can't do it.
Scare me. Scare me.
What we have to do is we just have to, maybe it might be as subtle as a little bit of a shake in the head. Maybe it'll be a little nod of the head. Maybe it'll be just a little hit in the body. But whatever it is, as long as we put some motion, just put a pin in that and show, like, we noticed it, boom, it's anchored into the scene. It will just bump this up really into some really exciting territory in terms of like reality and animation, believability, and all those things that we're trying to go for. So we're thinking about, we've heard these anchors, and we're thinking about the energy as well that we have on this little chart, and we're going to start thinking about staging and composition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I always do, which is reference in my character, okay, and start posing him out and start trying to get a sense of how he's going to move through the scene. Now, I've said this a million times, and I remember when I was actually submitting this character kind of as a model test, I just wanted to see what people thought of the model. Here he is. His name is Pierre. He's a really cute guy. I remember some people were like, hey, Kenny Roy, look at that. You're doing the 11-second club. And I said, well, I'm just trying to check out this model, see how he works and see how he moves and whatever. And then one person pointed out that I always am telling people you have to do all your animations with full body posing. You have to. And I was just submitting a model test, basically, like a rig test and a model test. And lo and behold, I was practicing what I preached, which is I had him posed full body, acting full body, using all of his body language and moving head to toe throughout the scene with my poses, and damn right I'm going to practice what I preach, because it's serious stuff. You're basically teaching yourself how to be half an animator if you do only seated characters. Okay, so I'm going to give him a little sword. This won't take too long. Another thing to just remember is that I'm not going to be creating a really complex rig for this sword, but in general, anything that moves around at all or is involved with your rigs should have a rig of its own. But I'm just basically just going to parent this. First I'm going to group it, and then I'm going to parent it or parent constrain it to the hand. Okay. Actually, let's have it in the other hand, and here's why. I feel like we're going to be on his left side, on his right side, and I'd rather pose the foreground hand, freely, not have anything in the foreground hand. So let's do this instead. So if you remember from the workflow lecture where I was doing the pantomime, first thing I like to do is I like to set up some full body poses. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab all of his controls, and I'm going to actually look at my my poses. And one of the ones I'm really excited about is kind of like this leaning forward, like, oh, you're not so scary, Mr. Devilman right here. So I'm just going to build that in, and it's everything can be retimed later. So you can't see this, but I've been working for just a little while, and I'm just trying to copy the kind of the strength of that pose. For me, that I drew was like how straight his one leg is, and it's actually in the wrong place. It needs to be further back. But how these poses are working together, these extremities are kind of working together to make a really kind of nice, kind of in-your-face kind of pose. Like he's totally like teasing this devil character, whoever this devil character is. Let me fix these hips a little bit and have him leaning down even more. But then again, like his head's a little bit more back, like, haha, you know, like that. Okay, something like that. Another pose that I was sure that I wanted to get was his super tired pose. So in order to build that, what I need to kind of do is make sure that his body language is kind of like visibly deflating. So it's like it's a relative pose. So what I kind of need to do is I need to get him in a sort of stood up pose so that I have somewhere to go to. So I might build my little kind of like neener pose, but in order to build my deflated pose, I also need sort of like a straight up pose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a pose where the character is listening, and when he's inhaling, he's going to be touching his face like oh my god, and then he's going to deflate when he says you're crazy. So let's first build the stood up pose. And let's actually get this. Let's get the sound playing here.
The tail, would you be more convinced?
So right here, and make sure we're all on step keys. Okay, we are. So, and if you're paying attention, you're seeing that I'm really not concerning myself where the steps happen right now. I'm just kind of building the poses and doing what I want. I'm trying to get the strongest thing. No matter what. Why? Because I know that as I'm working, polishing by definition, by its very definition, polishing means that things are going to be like buffed down. They're going to be reduced, right? So if I know that's what I'm up against, then why not get absolutely the strongest pose I possibly can and then have to fight a little bit, work really hard to try to get that pose to work with the staging and the composition and how I want the shot to turn out. Why not? Because otherwise what I'm doing is I'm just wasting time trying to push poses that are not working with timing that like I'm married to. Why would I want to let myself get married to this timing when instead I can have super awesome, ultra sweet poses working for me? I'm trying to create a little bit of room right here because his head is kind of big. It's kind of like Bishop from Animation Mentor. So I'm just trying to create a little bit of room here as he's touching his head. And I have a lot of cool controls I've built in here, like his beret, his skin to his head, so I can have it bounce around, and also this fluffy little collar that he has. I'm going to animate that moving and stuff. So don't worry that it's kind of looking weird and out of the way. So what I would normally do is on an action like this, can I hide the head controls? Ooh, I need to do that. Okay, I'm just going to turn this off. Okay. What I'll normally do is on something like an inhale, I'll make sure that I have at least built in that anchor to a point where it's unmistakable, to a point where I know, as I'm moving forward and as I'm polishing, I'm not going to mistake it, and it's not going to be missing all of a sudden from the final piece of animation. So what I'll do is I'll just I'll just set a key, and you know, on all these controls, and then I'll just go a little bit overboard on this inhale. So I'll even, I'm not sure if I did not build scale into this rig. I need to remember this stuff that I'm doing because, you know, I'm going to be using this rig for my film, so it's got to be pretty sweet. Okay, so just that much, you know. Okay, actually could probably use a little bit more rotation rather than translation, like this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and I want all these to be step keys. Right now they are, looks like my default has been turned back to spline, and that doesn't matter. It's no big deal if you don't want to change your default back and forth and back and forth. It's really not a big deal. I would say just be comfortable at all times and make sure you're working, you know, in a way that that works for you. Pretty much that simple.
Crazy.
Okay, and then on the exhale, I really want him like looking like really like soggy and dejected. So I'm just going to go all the way back on his whole spine and whatever. So this is something that I pointed out in a few lectures in the past, but it bears repeating. I just selected the entire spine and I zeroed it. Now, why did I do that? Because you never know if you're really getting back to like a default pose that works. Sometimes because you're like, maybe I've done a lot of rotation, maybe I'm getting an Euler flip, maybe, you know, this, that, and the other. And you never, ever, ever want to counterpose the spine or counter-animate the spine if you don't want to. So that's why I select all the controls of the spine and just zeroed them and then built my pose again. Because like, who wants to like all of a sudden discover that that there's a ton of a counter animation in your spine. Now Pierre is kind of interesting because he's kind of got these eyelids that that really they're really great. I love his eyelids because they're super dynamic and I love building them, and you know, you can get any shape you want with his eyelids. So I'm very happy with how they work. But the pain with them is that right now they don't move with the head, and that could kind of be a problem. So I'll probably add a control to make it so that they can be made to move with the head or with the eyes a little bit more. But for now, we're just going to have to stick with this. And then he kind of needs, I don't know, he just doesn't look quite deflated enough. Let's just like sink him down even more. And maybe his hand can be all the way down here. But I like the curve in his spine. Now, the things that I'm going to start thinking about is how I'm going to use these controls that I built in. So these are the special controls that I told you about earlier. This one controls the hardness, the sharpness rather, or the smoothness of the knee joint. Okay, and these controls, these movers, make it so that I can pretty much move the geometry of the leg in almost any direction that I want. Okay, and they're pretty cool. So they have like this influence over the leg and whatever. So when I'm thinking about keeping that snap together, right now we don't have to think about it. Why? Because we have a lot of layout and a lot of staging to continue to put in here. But I'm going to start thinking about like, how do I, how much do I want like the legs to like slap when they land, and should I put a little bit of like overlap and bend the knee backwards when that happens, or should I keep it realistic? So there we go. So now we have a couple poses built in. I opened a previous scene, so we already have him kind of like building up to our incredulous pose, or like, you're not so scary, Mr. Devilman. And then I have the exhale. So let's just like watch it for how these poses are working together now.
You think posing as the devil, you think it's gonna scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy.
Okay, so the unmistakable. So we have him going up right here, touching his head and breathing in, and then breathing out like that. Unmistakable. I know that as I'm working, I'm never, ever, ever going to miss that anchor. It's going to be in there, and it's going to be strong. Okay, so as I kept working forward on this, let me show you just a few more in progress shots. Here is one that has a little bit of jaw open close and mouth narrow wide. Those are the first two passes that you want to do on your mouth, and I find that it doesn't distract me. Now you have to make your own decision. It might distract you as you're working to do any facial animation before your scene is at least completely blocked in. For me though, I find that I pick out some things that I might later miss, like if there's a quick head turn and a open mouth shape, that open mouth shape has to be way bigger on a quick head turn so that it can read in that instant. So it's good to start thinking about those things ahead of time if you can. If it just confuses you, leave it out. But you'll see when you watch this that there is that. Another thing that you're going to see when you watch this is that I did a big laugh up here. Oops. Let's see here. I did a big laugh on the on the laugh in the dialogue, and then a step forward. And as you can see, he takes this big anticipation of the step forward and then hits it. Now on it ain't. That's in my. Let's bring this up again. In my little energy thing, it ain't is right here, and it really like shoots into it. It ain't. You guys want to know how to do snappy animation? Well, here's lesson number 1. If you have a line that feels like it has a quick start or a stop, then that's where you want to first really apply that snappiness. And so where I am right now, I'm not, it's not done, of course. It's still only in blocking. Oops. But this animation is really going to lend itself to that snappiness as I work forward. So let's just watch this and you can see all the poses that I got in so far.
You think posing as the devil, you think it's going to scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy.
Okay. Now, some things that immediately pop out for me is, well, my choice right here. Do you think posing as the devil? I wanted to have opposites, but we're seeing him from one side, so he can't actually like turn across camera, and he can't do too much like this. So it's good that he has a prop. Why? Because when he says you think posing, his hand is upturned and the sword is like this. As the devil, then as he takes a little bit of a lean forward, he turns the sword over. So that was my choice to get that in. Now this is still very, very, very loosely timed. And as you can see in my graph editor, all of the keys, pretty much for the most part, are all on the same frames. So this is a snap, a cinch to retime. There's some little stuff in between right here, but they're still all on step keys as well. In fact, if I get rid of, let's see here. Oops, where's the graph editor? Here it is. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Okay. So if I get rid of those facial controls, yeah, there's still some controls in between my main body frames, but for the most part, I can retime this by selecting, even in the dope sheet, I can still retime this. Okay. Now what I want to do is start looking at this because we are still in the layout. We're just actually coming out of layout because you start in blocking your step keys, but you start thinking about some timing issues, like inner monologue as a timing tool, and you start keeping these things in mind as you're working with your timing. I would say that blocking, the difference between layout and blocking is that layout, you start getting these poses that you always wanted to get into this character, into the scene. And then blocking is where timing, you all of a sudden remember that this is going to move and you need to time it. So this is still with very, very rough timing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, this is the quote unquote latest version of the scene, and I'm going to work forward from this one. So I haven't done any work. All that was Julia Child's cooking show. I'm going to put this in the oven and take out the one that's already cooked. So this is actually where the scene is at for me right now. Meaning that what I'm doing right now, you're actually seeing me do for the first time. So this is no BS. So let's watch it and just see where it's at right now, and then I'll start talking to you about putting in the snappiness and continuing this piece of dialogue according to how we've already picked out the energy needs to go. But let's watch it just a couple times and you'll see where we're starting from.
You think posing as the devil, you think is going to scare me? It ain't.
If I had cloven hooves and a pointed tail, would you be more convinced?
You're crazy. You think posing as the devil, you think is going to scare me?
Okay, so pretty much all of these actions really need that that snappiness put in right now. So remember what I was saying, snappiness doesn't necessarily mean just fast, because fast could be evenly timed. It could be a lot of starts and stops. It could be very staccato. Why snappiness feels like it works is because there is sort of like a unseen but almost just barely enough there to feel these little accelerations and decelerations. It almost needs to feel like the character has enough control or strength in their body to fast in to certain poses. Okay, so that's where snappiness really gets its first boost. And so the first thing I'm going to apply the snappiness to is the transition between posing and devil. So let's watch just this little section. Let me constrain the timeline as well.
You think posing as the devil?
Okay, see how he does it right now? He says, you think posing, and he very evenly comes out and says, as the devil. What we're going to do is we're just going to delay that. We're going to fix the timing of that a little bit, just to make it so that it feels a little bit more of a fast into the pose. Okay, so let's select all these controls and see. It's glorious. Look at this timeline, by the way. In 70 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 keyframes in 70 frames. And my bet is that if we got rid of, there's a few in here that are off that 70 frame thing, like this. What is this? Aha. All right. So it's probably actually like 10 main body keyframes. But let's fix it. Here we go. Okay. So instead of coming up so high on this anticipation right here, we're going to lessen that, but we're also going to delay that. Let me turn this off. Okay, here we go. All right. Oops. This thing. And these eyeballs keep on coming out. There we go. Okay. All right. One more time. Sorry about that. So let's set one all right here. Let's delete this one. Let's reduce this just a little bit. In fact, one way you can reduce it is you go like this. A little trick. So he's right here right now. We can just spline this. and middle mouse drag, copy it, and then just stepped everything again.
Is the devil.
See that? We just have, now we have a little bit of a reduced one.
Is the devil.
All right, now, like I said, we want to delay all of this. So let's move all of this over. And we want it to be a little bit faster as well. Let's move this in. Let's move this back.
Is the devil. The devil. Is the devil. Devil.
Let's delete this full body key, and let's make sure that this one is flat as well. Flat all the things.
Is the devil. You think posing is the devil.
Okay. Now, in order to make it, so check this out. So this pose right here, see this distance right here? The arc is not defined at all. Watch this hand. It goes from up there just to down there. So we're actually not getting an accurate representation of what this is going to look like when I spline it. So even when you look at this without trying to make this action a lot more snappy, you say to yourself, oh, this needs a breakdown anyway. And so this is one moment when if you want to make your animation a lot snappier, well, here you go. This is a perfect place to start, because your workflow dictates, hopefully, that you need to start putting in your some breakdowns anyway, right? So let's do that. Let's define this whole motion, and in putting in our breakdowns, we're going to make it fast into his new pose. Okay, so he comes down to here, meaning we need a breakdown. So it's 3 frames later. That kind of makes it a little bit hard, only because it's not even. All right, so let's do this. Let's make it just a little bit slower. Just a little bit slower. It can still be snappy even though it's a little bit slower. But what we're going to do is we're going to build a pose that's basically, for all intents and purposes, halfway between this pose on 45 and this pose on 49. But bias it towards 45 so it looks like a fast out. And I like to build overlap into my poses, right? All right, just a little bit. That's probably a little bit too much. And then I'm going to do that trick again. Remember, the trick is you go to the graph editor, you spline your key, and then you go halfway. Actually, in this case, I want to go basically 1 frame later and then copy it to 2 frames later. And then I'm going to flat everything, and then I'm just going to edit this new keyframe. Okay, see how it's still very linear? Okay, so I'm just going to edit that. Put a little bit more overlap in this next pose.
Is the devil. The devil.
Okay, and for a little bit more snap, we're actually going to make the overlap on his head kind of like a nod as he comes down. So he's coming down, but then boom, the head goes up and then comes down. And we can actually bring the head down a little bit more.
as the devil, as the devil, as the devil, as the devil.
And the sword is a little bit hard to see. I want to make sure that the sword is part of what we're watching here. So let me just let me add a new material to this just so you can see. Okay. Because the sword is a big part of your silhouette. It's a big shape, and it extends his arm. In fact, you know, the way that the wrist works, normally you get like the hand and the fingers working with things like overlap and silhouette, but when you extend it with such a hard, unbending thing, it's almost like you have like a second elbow in an arm that has two elbows. So you do need to be careful with when you're wielding a prop like this, which I'm trying to be. So, but at any rate, let's see what that gave us just now, all those changes.
Posing as the devil.
Okay, do you see the difference there?
As the devil. You think posing as the devil.
See how it feels like it waits and then whips into that? We can do it even more. And in fact, if you aren't experimenting, you're basically wasting your time. So this is definitely the point at which I would version my animation. I'm not going to do as I'm not going to ask you to do as I say, without practicing what I preach a little bit. So I just versioned up my animation, and now it's time to just go wild. Let's see how much we can crunch this together and just see what happens. Okay, so we have our little, action right here, and right now each one of these frames is 2 frames apart. Let's put them 1 frame apart. And I don't know what this is going to, I've never done this. You're watching me do this for the first time. And worst case scenario, I have to reopen my old file. Worst case scenario. But now I'm going to hit play and see what happens. And if you're not doing this, why are you fooling around? Why aren't you taking this seriously? All right, here we go.
You think posing as the devil. You think
Ooh, that's really cool.
As the devil. You think posing as the devil. You think posing as the devil. You think posing as the devil.
Awesome. I think this anticipation actually can be bigger though. Now that it's super snappy, I think we can lift it up like this.
As the devil.
Oh, it's so cool.
As the devil. You think posing 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 as the devil.
Oh, it's so cool. And what is going to feel nice is as if this frame right here, 52 and 56. Look at the difference between these 2 poses. You know that this is not really a breakdown that you would necessarily have to put in. It wouldn't scream out to you, I'm a breakdown, put me in, right? You know what I mean? It's not like defining an arc or putting an overlap or anything like that. But if you can get these kinds of breakdowns in, this is really going to help you in splining. Because just watch it one more time and look at right after he does the motion how he kind of does a little bit of settle. It's just great to have that key there so that your splines are going to go all over the place. Watch one more time.
Posing as the devil.
You see that? He hits it and then there's just that little bit more settle, so that's going to really work out. Let's work with posing. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keyframes to work with right now on the full body with the word posing. You think posing, and what I tried to do in the beginning was almost like posing with that sword. Again, he's gesticulating with the sword, and I think that it can be very strong. You just got to be careful that you don't go so far with it that it looks like he's sword fighting an invisible, bumblebee.
You think posing as the devil.
So I think the thing we want to make snappier is definitely the po of posing. The sword going down, can't really mess with that because it feels a little bit, to me, it feels kind of married to the timing of the word. And let's not forget that there's an anchor on the ing of posing. Let's listen for it one more time.
You think posing.
Right, that little bit of kind of throat, like loss of air or something like that. And I kind of have it in there. Maybe we can go even further with that pose though. But let's just take a look at this and snappy it up, okay? Okay, so let's delay this. Okay. Okay. It's too far forward. So what I'm going to do is on this, actually I'm going to copy this frame back to where it was, and then on this frame I'm going to, oops, I'm going to bring him back just a little bit. What's going on? You and you in the world. In fact, this is just still too far forward. And now on that first motion, I think we can, let's just see what happens if we go overboard. Remember, worst case scenario, let me save it. I have incremental saved as, or turned on as well. So I actually get like, you know, I think 5 or 10 incremental saves for each time I hit Control Save anyway. So I'm making no changes that can't be undone. All right. The reason that this right now is not feeling very snappy is because of this. See how he leans backwards, but he's moving forward, and overall the head actually doesn't go anywhere. It actually looks like it's rotating just around the little front of his lip. Look at that. See that? So that's a problem. What we need to do is we need to go somewhere, maybe in anticipation, maybe just a breath of anticipation, so that there is somewhere to go. So let's just do that. Let's just like add that in. Just a little bit, just like that. Let's see what happens.
Posing.
It's too much. And also, should probably just turn all my curves to flat, but
posing.
Okay, this is good. We're going to work through this, but right now what's happening is this is what your animation will start looking like if you just try to make everything faster. All right, you have to tweak the spacing of everything, because without that, what you just get is sped up animation at the size, like I mean, like just like even like the breadth of the gesture, the arc in the screen, and like the amplitude. I mean, which doesn't work at all speeds. So we actually need to tone down this just even more.
Posing.
So what I'm going to do is I'm happy with this key, but I'm not happy with this one. Let's move this guy back. Let's keep his head very still. And then crunch it up when he does that sound on ing. Okay, so what I just did right there is this. I'm worried that not enough things are taking on this slow in, this visual slow in. So I just did it to his head, I just did it to his body just a little bit, but probably most visually effective is I did it to the sword. So I had it reach this apex a little bit later, and then see how it comes down, and then it's like, oh, it still is like, it's going down, but look, it almost anticipates, but overlaps at the exact same time, and then boom, it comes down. So let's just see how that looks. I might have to flat all these again.
Posing as the devil. Posing as the devil. Think posing as the devil. Think posing as the devil. Posing as the as the devil.
And now what we get to see is how these two things are working together. So let's just watch these together for a second.
You think posing as the devil. 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 Okay. What just pops out at me is that this is working a lot better than, the posing is working a lot better than the devil. And the reason I think that's happening is because we started kind of like respecting the anticipation on this first movement a lot more, the right size, and now this one is feeling just a little bit too rushed. So again, I'm just going to hit save. Now I get a new incremental save for that. I'm just going to, first thing we're going to try is just retime this anticipation. Just give it one more frame. Let's just see what happens when I do that. Posing as the devil.
Okay, so that's not really feeling like it did everything we need. Let's do the same trick that we've been doing, all day, which is take this key, spline it, go like halfway through, and then middle mouse drag, set that key, and then flat everything. And let's just see what that gives us.
As the devil.
There we go. See how much smoother this is starting to feel, but it hasn't lost its speed. It's still like hitting it and then hitting it again. The snappiness is still there. It's surviving these edits.
Posing as the devil. You think 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 posing as the.
Okay. Now this is where we are right now with this piece. At this point, there are enough keys that I can very easily see how I'm going to take it into Blocking Plus. I can very easily add the breakdowns I need to make sure that it doesn't get destroyed when I spline it. More importantly, I can start adding the performance texture in there. Like for instance on posing, what I can do is on that of posing, I can do a little bit of like a head shake. And I know it'll survive to, through to the polished version if I put it in now, but I put it in big enough that it'll survive polishing. Polishing is by definition, let me show you. So you've got this like surface, right? And let's say this is, I don't know, like microscopic view of like a ridge on your car. If you polish it, if you buff it down, you might get, this nice kind of smoothed out version. But look at that, all of the texture is gone. And so there's two different workflow methods that you can use to take all of this, this concept of polishing into account. The first is not the one I do. That would be to, when you are polishing, go back in and constantly make a tweak to the overall, like the feeling that you're getting, and then put back in that that texture, put back in that little bit of a hitch or the pop or the little bit of a waver on that perfectly smooth curve, all those things. A lot of people do this, and I'm not saying, well, I don't do this, and now it's like, oh, well, you can't do it either. Everyone has their own workflows. That's what's beautiful about it. So that's fine. So you might have heard people say like, oh, I need to finish my shot. It's good. I just need to dirty up the keys just a little bit. And that's what they're doing basically, is they're adding back that little bit of organic kind of imperfection. What I like to do instead is I like to take my animation, and while I'm making it, I make it so overblown with the texture, you know, it would look like this. Okay? Actually, we're not really getting the right picture here. Okay, so here's the old one. All right, I would make it so overblown, it's like this. Okay, why? Because then I know that when I smooth it out and I'm polishing and I'm moving forward, literally even going from step to spline, okay, that when I smooth it out, it'll actually end up looking almost exactly like I want it, just because that's what smoothing does. It buffs everything down a bit. So for me, I like to predict the fact that polishing is going to water down my pose choices and my timing choices and all that stuff, and like to go way overboard. So you might watch this where we are right now and kind of think to yourself, well, we've got something that, but I do think that it could be, you know, a little bit smoother. I do think it could be a little bit more animation-y, like, you know, the poses could be, you know, could work a little bit better together. You might see some hitches and pops or whatever. But when I look at this, I see something that when I start splining and really working those breakdowns is going to constantly be its own reminder to me of the size I wanted and the speed and the spacing and the swishes that I wanted to begin with. Okay? So that's the way I like to think about polishing and moving forward. Let's watch it one more time and see if we can't pick anything out that we would want to work on before we move on with this shot.
You think posing as the devil? You think posing as the devil? You think posing as the devil? You think posing as the devil?
So we are in step mode right now. I might do something like a little bit of head texture right here. Let me just put something in to show you what I mean. Like you think like that, like a pose like you think, and maybe just a little bit on the body, just a breath on the body. Okay. And now that might be really big, and this might pop out, but this would be definitely a good example of what I'm talking about in terms of, like, I know that when I move forward with this idea, it'll be fine, especially when I start going into blocking. So let's just see how that read.
You think posing as the devil?
Yeah, see how it looks a little big?
You think posing as the devil?
Now I'm just going to do an experiment here. I'm not really sure what this is going to turn into, but let me just spline it and just see what happens.
You think posing as the devil? You think posing as the devil? You think posing as the devil?
All right. The you think needs a little bit of work, but I think you'll agree that the posing and the devil survived really well through that, just selecting all, clicking spline, and seeing what I get, what's left, right? That can be a very destructive moment in your animation because you're thinking of one thing and then you see another. So I'm pretty proud of how that's going. But I think I'm going to go back to stepped. Let's watch it one more time. I think I'm going to go back to stepped after this, though.
You think posing as the devil? You think posing as the devil?
Let me just take out this key. We'll see.
You think posing as the devil? You think posing as the devil?
The step forward in the beginning is a little bit hitched. And And I would want to make it, I would want to probably delay that foot just a little bit more so he can lean a little bit more forward on his feet before he shuffles that foot. But I'm going to go back to step mode right now. I'm going to save it like this. I'm going to work a little bit more on it off camera. And I think we're going to stop right there. Right now we're at almost an hour and a half, almost 90 minutes for this lecture. So let's do a 2-part lecture, I think. So I'm going to work on this shot and we'll finish it up next week, and I'll show you everything from blocking all the way through final polish and how I kept the snappiness in the shot. Don't forget the first things that we did with the shot though. I really wanted to emphasize and put all together for you those things that I have been talking about in terms of dialogue. All right, specifically in terms of finding the energy and the anchors in the dialogue. This little energy chart, you know, it's a little hokey, and it will make no sense to anybody else, but very, very valuable. Don't forget to look up Paul Lassane as well. He's got a great blog. And also, when you are thumbnailing, remember that's a very personal process. For me, well, I definitely need to thumbnail his character a lot more so that I can get his proportions right when I'm drawing him. But overall, you should be concerned first and foremost with communication, and you need to communicate with yourself first. So whatever your thumbnails you want them to be, if you want them to be kind of like a linear, almost like a storyboard, or a kind of like a, you know, a pencil test on 8s or 12s or whatever, that's fine. For me though, I like to choose poses that are kind of like best case scenario, poses that are kind of like, you know, if I had my way, I would get this pose into the animation. And then I try really hard to do that. The result is normally something where I'm happy and I don't feel like I compromised on any pose for the most part. So just take that into consideration when you're choosing which planning tools you're going to be using for each one of your shots. Great, awesome. I'm really happy with where the shot is going. I can't wait to show you the finished version. Thank you for talking about snappiness, and you're going to see that that conversation finished up in the next lecture in November, which will be the 1-year anniversary of KennyRoy.com. So with that, I just want to thank everybody so much. Thank you for being here on the site. I really appreciate the support. I'm still having a great time. There's nothing better than this. What could be better than this? Okay. Before CTN, don't forget there is a referral contest going on right now. If you win the referral contest, you win a free copy of How to Cheat in Maya 2012. More details about that are in the member blog and on the homepage right now in a YouTube video describing what to do. So check that out. Thank you guys. Good luck with your animation, and as always, rock on.